Well, welcome everybody again to today's webinar. My name is Alex and I'm going to be hosting the session here today. I get the privilege of doing this on a weekly basis to kind of go over areas of Aplos, but then on a monthly basis, we go over some more advanced topics. So historically, we've done one on journal entry as well as kind of bringing in some year-end gifts as well as closing procedures for the end of a calendar year. So what we're looking at today is kind of nonprofit best practices for a new fiscal year. So it's currently in January. Most people have their fiscal year on the same schedule as their calendar year. So for a lot of you, you're beginning a new year right now for 2016. So what we're going to focus on today is how do you get started with that, specifically in Aplos, but then kind of overall for an accounting software. For those of you who are new to Aplos, we're going to be using our software as the example here today. So if you're new in Aplos and you're kind of wondering what are the first steps to get started with our software is, we're going to go over that. But then for those of you who are currently our customers that, you just kind of want to make sure that you're starting the year correctly, we're also going to address some stuff in that regard as well. So kind of the bullet points today are learn how to get started in a new accounting software, including creating starting balances and a chart of accounts. Evaluate and update your chart of accounts to reflect your needs for the upcoming year, create an effective budget for the new year, and then review how your budgets will be displayed in your reports and how you can share them with your team and your board. Mainly what we're going to take a look at is how to create or modify your chart of accounts, enter starting balances, or make sure that the old year is nice and closed like it should be, entering a budget for the new year, and then what reports should you focus on for the new year, okay? Let's go ahead and get started. Well, so the first thing that we're going to take a look at here is your chart of accounts. So in Aplos, if on the left-hand side, if you're an accounting customer with us, you've got your navigation here. One of the tabs here is accounting. If you click on accounting, you've got accounts, which will bring you to the section where you can manage your chart of accounts. Now, before I dive too much into this, let me just quickly explain what this is. In any accounting software, whether you use Aplos or QuickBooks or Quicken or Xero, whatever you end up using, you're going to do three primary things in an accounting software, okay? The first one is to create a chart of accounts, which is basically just the listing and the categories of the different ways that you spend money, receive money, and track all of your money within your organization. And I'm going to go through each one of these types of accounts, so don't worry about that. So you would create your chart of accounts. That's kind of your skeleton or your foundation, your structure, okay? So once you have that created, then what you do is you use those accounts in transactions to record the money coming in or out of your organization with the eventual goal of kind of doing the third thing, which is pulling reports. So setting up your accounts, entering transactions, and then pulling reports is kind of the basic formula of any accounting software. So it all kind of boils down to this creation of your chart of accounts. So if you're new with Aplos and you first sign up for a 15-day free trial, it's going to walk you through a quick tutorial of kind of how to do things in Aplos. One of those is how to create an account. So you'll most likely be generally familiar with it, but then to create, the rest of your accounts or to kind of build out your chart of accounts, you're going to do that here in this screen, okay? So kind of from top to bottom, you've got your funds, which I'll explain here in a second, and then you have the different types of accounts as well. So asset, liability, equity, income, and expense. Now, again, an account is a category that you set up in an accounting software to track something within these larger kind of buckets, okay? So, for instance, your assets. Your assets are accounts that you want to create to represent anything that your organization owns, okay? O-W-N-S, owns. So at the most basic level, this is an account to represent your bank accounts. So I have one here called 1000-checking, another one here called savings, or even accounts receivable, so money that's owed to me but I haven't received yet. Assets can be really anything that you own. So this can be investments, this can be buildings or property or equipment, anything that your organization owns, you're going to want to create as an asset account here, okay? You also notice that we've got these groups here. So your groups are just kind of like different folders that you can put your accounts in. So like I have a group for fixed assets, one for current assets. You can add a group just by clicking this button here, call it, other assets or something like that, and then save. And then once that group is created, you can now create an account by clicking this little black plus button here to create an account within that group, okay? So your assets, again, are anything that you own, okay? So liabilities then are anything that your organization owes. So this is money, this is debt. So this is any short or long-term debt that you as an organization might owe. So this, as an example, would be like my balance of my credit card, right? So I spend money on credit. I owe that credit company. So until I pay it, it's money that I owe someone else, being a credit card. This can also be an accounts payable. So if someone comes out to my property and does some work and I now owe them, whatever they invoiced me, that's an accounts payable. And you can even have long-term debt here, like long-term liabilities, like a bank loan or a vehicle loan, stuff like that. So those are your liabilities. Again, any account to represent money that you owe, okay? I'm going to jump down to income real quick. Income is an account that you would create to represent any money that you are receiving and kind of why, right? So I've got a couple here. I've got contributions income, building grant income, interest earned. So basically, if you're going to record that I'm recording, $100 worth of income, what is that $100? Is it a contribution? Is it tithe? Is it a grant? Is it revenue from you selling something? Is it, a service that you provide that you then earned some sort of like payment for, any way that you receive money, you would want to create that as an income account. And then the opposite of that is expenses. So this is any way that you spend money. So I have administrative expenses, other expenses like salaries, rent, bank fees, building expenses, office supplies. This can be like meals and entertainment. It can be, Netflix. It can be really anything that you spend money on would be an expense account. And again, the purpose of this chart of accounts here is to create these categories that are then used in transactions with the eventual goal of pulling a report to show you how you spent your money, how you received your money. So instead of just saying, I received $10,000 this month, okay, you can then take a look at like an income statement report. And because you've used different income accounts to record that 10,000, you can see that my $10,000 might have come, 5,000 from contributions and 5,000 from a grant. So kind of the eventual purpose is to see the information on a report. So you kind of want to structure the chart of accounts to represent what you eventually want to see, right? So when creating accounts, my big recommendation is for people to create these to be unique to your organization. If you're kind of new to the world of accounting and you went online and just Google searched, show me a nonprofit chart of accounts, you might have gotten something that's really huge and ugly from the IRS that has a lot of accounts that you'll never use. My personal kind of soapbox with this is your chart of accounts is completely unique to your organization. There will be similarities. So everybody's going to have, everything in these 5 different categories, and even the numbering, typically assets are numbered in your 1,000 range. Liabilities are 2, equity is 3, income is 4, and expense is 5,000 plus. That numbering generally stays the same. So there are similarities between organizations for a chart of accounts. But as far as what the accounts are, like, do you call it office supplies or do you call it office equipment? Or do you call it meals and entertainment or food and, whatever? That's up to you. So these categories, these things that you're setting up need to be kind of thought out for your organization. So that's kind of an encouragement to take your time here. So as you go through your assets, really think through what would be an asset, what would be a liability, what would be an income and an expense as well. And then the last little category here is your funds. So how Aplos works is a fund is something that's almost like its own little mini organization within your larger total. So we differ from other softwares because we do this thing called fund accounting, which is a fundamentally different type of accounting than normal business practice, to where every transaction that you enter in Aplos, whether it's income or expense or debt payment or a building that you purchase, everything has a fund assignment. So it's a little bit unique. But the benefit of that is you can track your fund's total balance across your assets, liabilities, income, and expenses all the way through to all of your reports, so that at any given time, you know how much money is set aside for your building fund or your general fund or your missions fund. So that's typically the question that I give people is, if you can answer the question, how much money do I have set aside for blank? The blank is most likely going to be a fund that you would want to create up here. And each fund that you create, so let's create like a missions fund or something, missions fund. Each fund that you create will automatically set up an equity account to track the overall balance. And by the way, the color does not matter. Make it whatever color you want. That has no accounting significance whatsoever. It's just pretty. So I added that fund. So now in equity, I've got my missions fund. Okay, so now when I record a transaction, missions fund is a fund that I can select to either record where the money's coming from or going into. Okay. So that's your chart of accounts. So for you new people, think through this in great detail. Take your time and keep in mind that this is your foundation. This is kind of your skeleton of which things will build off of. But this can always change. So if down the road, if a couple months from now you realize that, I really wish I would have set up a different income account for this or a different expense account for that, go create it. It doesn't matter. This doesn't lock down. So don't be afraid to kind of do this and then go do stuff. And then once you realize that, something needs to change in your chart of accounts, then go change it. No big deal. For those of you who have been around Aplos and you have your chart of accounts and you're just wanting to now make sure it's good for the next year, my recommendation would be this. Kind of go through your prior year reports, like go through your income statement, your balance sheet, your transaction list, kind of take a look at how you used your accounts during the last year, and then make any changes. So if you've got an expense account that is never used and you don't see yourself using it, then delete it or disable it if it's been used in a transaction somewhere. But that'll kind of get it removed. So now you can create a new category that actually makes sense. You can also change these account names and numbers. So if I wanted to restructure this to salary and wages, and I wanted this to be 5,600, I can do that. Just keep in mind that any changes that you make to an account change the account everywhere in Aplos. So I ran into that question this morning. Somebody was asking, so if I change this, does that change all of my prior year stuff as well? Yes. So you're changing the category. So now every time the category is used somewhere, it's now going to say 5,600 salary and wages, except, other than what it was previous. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want to change the prior year stuff, but you want new categories, then I would recommend disabling the current accounts and then creating new ones. Okay. That would then save those categories and kind of, push them aside so they can't be used going forward. So you can always go back and run a report and see, those old categories that were used. But going forward, you can create a new structure, new names, new numbers, new format that make more sense. So that way you're not kind of stuck using an old system. If that makes sense. So there's your chart of accounts. So for those of you, again, who have been around for a little while, go through and just make sure everything still makes sense, make changes as necessary. And for those of you who are new to accounting or Aplos specifically, just take your time as you go through this and create your accounts as you need the accounts created. Also, at the end of today, I'll kind of show you some other lessons and tutorials that we've got on this subject. So if you want to learn more about what accounts are, what are the different types and what would be an example, we've got some excellent resources there for you. So I'll mention those at the end. So once you have your chart of accounts created, the next thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that your balances are good to go for this current year. Okay. So for you new people, so for those of you who are new to Aplos, you're just kind of now creating your chart of accounts here. Once you have your chart of accounts created, you're going to want to enter what's called your starting balances. Okay. So you're new to the account. You've just created your foundation. So now before you enter the first transaction that happens in January, you want some sort of a starting place, right? So if you spend, $100 today, that money needs to draw from somewhere. So you're coming into Aplos most likely with money in the bank, however much that might be. So what you would need to do is go to starting balances up here at the top. And that's going to list your assets here. So all the different things that I own, right? All my possessions, and then my debt. So my current credit cards or my payables or my long-term liabilities there. And then at the top, you've got your funds. Okay, so how this works is whatever the balance is in each one of these accounts, you're going to want to enter it divvied up among your funds like so. So let's say I'm starting Aplos as of January 1st, which is what I recommend for starting place, January 1st. I would go to my bank and I'd see at the beginning of the day, January 1st, I had $10,000 in my checking account. Okay. So what I would do is I'd say out of that 10,000, I want 6 of it to be allocated to my general fund. So I'm going to put in 6,000 here. And then let's say my building fund, I want 1,000 allocated for that. So the remaining 3 is going to be in my missions fund. Okay. So as I enter these balances here, the total is 10,000. So my total checking balance will be 10,000. But what I'm doing here is I'm saying this 10,000 is split up among my funds like so. And I would do the same thing for savings. So let's say my savings account had $50,000, and I had 15 for general, I had 30 for building, and then 5,000 for missions. Okay, so you would divvy that up per your funds. Now, same thing with receivables, buildings, credit cards, accounts payable, bank loans, that kind of stuff is all applicable too for the starting balances. But really, if you had to start somewhere today, I would recommend doing it for your bank accounts. Reason being, that's most likely where your transactions are coming from. So if you want to get started in Aplos and start recording stuff, all the transactions, then I would start at least with your checking and savings account as of January 1st to get those balances in there. And once you do, if you click update, that will save those balances. So now if I go over to transactions, my starting balance here is shown in my checking account, and I now have $10,000 to start. So now I can start recording transactions as of, January 1st that I went to, Best Buy, and I bought a computer, and that was $1,000. And let's say that was coming out of my office. Do I have office equipment? Office, yeah, it's just office supplies. So I hit that expense account. It's coming out of my general fund, and then I click submit. So there you go. So now from January 1 forward, right? So don't start in December, since your starting balance kind of was beginning as of January 1st. Anything from there forward is either going to add to or take away from that starting balance that you put in. So there's that $1,000 expense. It brought my checking balance down to $9,000, and it brought $1,000 out of my general fund because that was the fund that I used. Okay. So at any given time, you can see your fund balances like so. You can even switch over to your other checking accounts, like my savings. There's my starting balance there, so I can see kind of the fund breakout for that account as well. And that's how you get started to enter transactions once you've created your chart of accounts again and put in your starting balances. Now, for those of you who are, again, have been with us for a little bit, starting balances are not really applicable. What you're more looking for is making sure that you have the right balances as of the end of the previous year to make sure that 2016 is starting correctly. So we have a whole nother webinar that we did last month on year-end closing procedures that not only covers accounting stuff, but just overall organization stuff. One of those is making sure that all of your transactions are entered, all of your balances are correct, so that your end of the year financial statements as of December 31 are, match the bank, and all of your income and expense make sense. So then if that's all correct, then January 1 should be fine. So instead of focusing on January 1, making sure it's fine, if you've kind of, dotted your T's and crossed your I's for 2015, then 16 should be fine. You should be good to go. Just double check that maybe your bank balance is right before you go too much farther, because then, having to go research that down the road would be more difficult. Okay. Cool. So let's move on to, let's see, we already covered starting balances. Let's do budgeting stuff. So budgeting is an advanced setting that you can turn on. So in accounting, if you go to advanced settings, you can turn on these screens. These do not cost you anything, so feel free to turn them on. But they do add different screens to the software. So kind of by default, we turn everything off so it doesn't clutter your screen. But you can, again, turn them on if you want. One of which is budgeting. So if I click show and click go, that will bring me over to budgeting, which can be found by going to accounts here in the accounting section, and then up at the top here is budgeting. So budgeting, what this allows you to do is set projected values for your income and your expense accounts. So that way, as you go through the year and you're recording transactions, you can compare how you're actually doing in each one of your income and expense categories to how you thought you were going to be doing for the year. Okay. So once you land here, you can pick a budget year, which is the current plus 2 in the future. Let's say it's 2016, and then click manage your budget. Okay. So that is going to bring me to this screen where by default, it's going to show me my income accounts and my expense accounts, and then have a little field here for my 2016 budget. So if you have been with Aplos for a while, you can also do the show you last year's actuals here. You could show that up. So that way, if you have a full year in Aplos, you can even see last year's budget too. So if you wanted to kind of compare what was last year's budget and how did we do, and then that kind of dictates, what your totals or your projections will be for 2016, that will help. You can also show this year's actuals if you want to see how you've done kind of year to date. You can also manage a 3-year budget at a time if you want. You can do that as well. So here's 2016, 17, and 18. But mostly for those of you who are kind of new to this, you just want to focus on 1 year at a time. So I would go through here and based on your own projections, right? So this is kind of organization specific. How aggressive do you want to be? What is your growth pattern? How much do you want to kind of project, I guess, for each income and expense account? So I'd go through here and say, let's see, contributions income, I want to be, $36,000 throughout the year. My building grant, I know that we've got a grant in the queue, and that's going to be $10,000, so I'm going to budget for that. And then for interest earned, we've got some investments that I think are going to yield some interest. So let's just say $500 here. So I would go through here and put the totals for each one of my income accounts here. And then it's going to give me my total income budget for the 2016 year. So then I'd go down here and say rent, is $1,000 a month. So let's say $12,000 is my rent. I've got a salary worth of $30,000, let's say. So let's put that in. And then bank fees, let's just put in $100. Building expense, $1,200. And then office supplies, I want to spend $1,000. So you go through all your expense categories too and put those in. So it's going to give you your total budget for income by each category and then the total, and then your total expense as well. And then down at the bottom, here is your projected net income, which is your income minus your expenses. So what this is saying is that according to budget, if we stay to all of these budgets and don't go over, under, and we hit them, then at the end of the year, we will have a net income of $2,200. Okay, so that is the budgeting process. Now that is kind of software specific. The budgeting process of actually kind of dreaming up a budget and approving it with your board and all that kind of stuff, that is kind of separate. That's a whole different situation that you'll have to walk through, kind of specific to your own organization. But once you have those categories thought up and then a budget kind of dreamt, you can put those in here for the 2016. One other thing that you can do here is you can show a monthly breakdown. So by default, if I put an amount here in for the total and I click the monthly, it's going to show me that amount divided by 12 for each month. So it kind of impartially divides the total up divided by 12. What you can do is you can actually budget by month as well. So if, let's say, I wanted 36,000 to be the case, but I know that April is low typically, so I'm going to put in 2,000 here, but we're going to make up for it in July. So here's 4,000. So you can do that. So it's still the same total, but you can kind of play with the monthly breakdown. So that way, if you are kind of expecting one month to be lower or higher, you can kind of forecast that. But you don't have to. You can just do the total, and then that'll divide it by 12, giving you an impartial budget by month for the year. Okay, so that's budgeting. Now that kind of applies to new people as well as existing. So everybody usually has benefit of a budget. So if you're familiar with this process in Aplos, go for it for the 2016 year. If you're new to it, then once you have your income and expense accounts created, they will pop up here to where then you can budget for them. So if you have any questions, let us know. Now, again, kind of the purpose of this is to compare the information on reports, which brings me kind of to the last category that I wanted to cover, which is what reports do you want to take a look at or pay attention to this year? We have a lot of reports here, and more are coming. So we have kind of the basic little categories here, like income statement, balance sheet, account list, transaction list, income by person, expense by payee, contact list, agings, bank rec, statement. So okay, so we've got all those. What do you need, right? It can be kind of overwhelming. So most organizations run off of two main reports, and that is an income statement and a balance sheet. There are other ones that could be used and may even commonly be used, but the two ones that are almost always used is an income statement and a balance sheet. The other stuff that we have here, like account list, transaction list, income and expense by person, these kind of reports, these are more like detail and research kind of reports. So if I then look at an income statement and I see that, this total, for my income account is more than I thought, so I want to kind of dive into the detail, that would be like a transaction list. Or if I want to see all the transactions for a specific person for whatever reason, that would be one of these. So these reports are not necessarily ones that you would bring to, let's say, a board meeting or give to your congregation or something. These are kind of research reports. So these will help you kind of hone in on totals. But the income statement and the balance sheet are ones that you will distribute to people, that you'll print maybe in a quarterly report or even bring to your board meetings. Okay, so let's take a look at these two reports. The first of which here, income statement. So for any of our reports, you click on them and then you can kind of customize them once you're on the screen here with different options here on the right, and then date ranges or filters at the top. But the basic format to an income statement is your income minus your expense equaling your net income or loss for the period of time that you have set up here. So this is going to default to the current fiscal year that you have in Aplos. So if it's January, it's going to default all reports back to January 1st of 2016 through whatever the date is here today. So to date, I've only got one transaction, that one that I entered for Best Buy here for $1,000, which means I've got no income and a $1,000 expense. So my net income is negative $1,000. Okay. You can also see this by fund. So if I wanted to add a column for one of my funds, I can do that. I can also add a column for my budget. Okay. So there's that budget that you set. So I can see that here's my office supplies budget was $1,000 for the year, and I already hit it. So there it is. I'm already 100% for my budget for the year. And then if you click fund balances, that'll add your fund balances in there as well. So you can kind of see again, your total income, right? But then how that total income or expense is broken up among your different funds. You can also just put one fund in here too. Let me do that. So if I just wanted to see my general fund, income, expense, net income, I can see that by adding a column for it. Okay, so that's kind of one report that you'd bring is the income statement. Depending on who you're reporting or what you're reporting for, they might require a different date range. So if it's a monthly thing or if it's a quarterly or year to date, you can set the date range up here and just click update. And then the other report that they might want you to bring is not only an income statement, but a budget to actual, which you can get there from here. But from the main report screen, you can actually click on budget to actual as well. That will bring you to your income and your expenses, but then with all those budget categories added. So you can see how you're doing year to date compared with how you budgeted for the year. Okay. So kind of the three reports there: income statement, budget to actual, which is an income statement with budget stuff on it. And then the third report here is your balance sheet. So the income statement has a date range. So year to date or last year or monthly or quarterly. The balance sheet is different because this is only one day in time. So let's say at the end of January, you want to run financial statements for the month. So you'd run an income statement from January 1 through the 31st, but the balance sheet is just January 31st. Okay, because what this does is it shows you kind of a snapshot of all of your assets, liabilities, and equity balances to date for whatever date that you run it for your entire organization. And the basic formula here is your assets equal your liabilities plus your equity. That's kind of how it's always been explained. An easier way that I've found to explain it is your assets minus your liabilities equals equity. It's the same thing. So if you kind of think about it, the money and the stuff that I own here, all of my possessions minus what I owe other people is what I'm kind of totally worth at the end of the day. Okay. So you can see here, I've got my checking and my savings here. So a total of $59,000 worth of assets. And then that's broken up among my fund balances like so. Okay. So I've got kind of a $20,000 general fund balance, $31,000 building fund balance, $8,000 missions fund balance. Now, just to kind of hedge off at the pass, a lot of people wonder, well, this general fund balance doesn't match my checking account. Well, it's not supposed to. Depending on how you track things, it could be very different. For those of you who have questions about what this means or like where is this $20,000, something that we can do that no other softwares really can do if they're not a fund accounting software is run a balance sheet by fund. So if you click add column and you say, I want to see a balance sheet for each one of my funds, I'd add those in there. So now it kind of looks like your starting balances page, right? So my total is on the very right here. So my total for checking is $9,000, but that is split up among my funds like so. I've got 3,000 in missions, 1,000 in building, 5,000 in general. With my savings, it's kind of the same. I've got 15 for general, 30 for building, 5,000 for missions, equaling my total $50,000 for savings. If I look vertically down the pipe for each of these funds. I've got 5,000 here in my checking account. I've got 15,000 in my savings account for this fund, which brings me to a total of 20, which is why I have a total general fund balance of $20,000. Same with building, same with missions. Okay, so for those of you who have questions about the balance sheet, why certain fund balances are not totaling what you think they should, I would recommend running this report and see if it brings any clarity. And if not, feel free to reach out and we can help kind of investigate that. All right. Again, all reports can be customized on the right-hand side here using different report modifiers or filters, so feel free to customize those as you see fit. But those are kind of the high-level reports that you're going to want to generate. So an income statement showing your income and your expense, and then possibly a budget to actual to show that same thing, but with your budget projections included, and then your balance sheet. Anything else can be supplementary that some people might request of you, but probably don't need to generate it on a too frequent of a basis. Okay. So that is reports. And you know what? That about covers everything that I wanted to cover here today. So what we did was we took a look at kind of where you would start in an accounting program, and that is by creating your chart of accounts. Kind of briefly explained what a chart of accounts is, what each category would be, how you would create it, a little black plus button there. And then once you have them created, you would set starting balances if you're new. Otherwise, just make sure that your balances are correct for the previous year. And then you would set your 2016 budget, kind of with the overall purpose of giving you a kind of a solid foundation or a skeleton to now work off of when entering transactions, with the kind of end of the day purpose of being able to pull a report and see how much money you've made and spent and have at any given time, broken down by fund, and then compared with your budget for the 2016 year. Now, accounting and bookkeeping is a massive topic, and so there are thousands of things that we did not cover here today. But hopefully this kind of helped as a general exposure to how you can get started for the year, and then kind of plan things going forward. But what I'd like to do now is I want to show you some support resources that we have, like I mentioned earlier, and then I want to open it up for some question and answer time. Okay. So real quick, if you go to your dashboard, and you don't have to do it now, I'm just showing you, but if you go to the dashboard, on the right-hand side, you've got this menu here, and there are some support resources, which give you some basic kind of video tutorials on different topics, or if you click on quick links, that will bring you to our resources section here. And then if you click on the Academy, that will bring you to our Academy here. And the lesson here, Intro to Nonprofit Accounting, would be very helpful if you are new to accounting or just want to learn more about what fund accounting is and how you can use it for your organization. This is a series that I wrote, so you're going to hear more from me. And the first seven lessons are done. I would highly recommend the first 2, if not the first 5. That sounds like a lot, but bear with me. So lesson 1 here is what is accounting? So it goes through a real basic look at what accounting is. It kind of goes through the different 5 categories that we touched on here today. And then lesson 2 is what is fund accounting? So how does fund accounting now differ from basic accounting? And then what is a chart of accounts for a nonprofit? What is a general ledger, or how do you enter transactions? And then what are the kind of reports or statements that you should look at? All of these are non-Aplos specific, so even if you don't use Aplos, feel free to check them out. They're free for you. And each one has a video. So there's me laughing. You can watch the video, which is kind of a couple-minute overview of the topic, but then below that is a pretty good amount of content. So if you're more of a reader, or if you're a referencer and you want to go and kind of read through this, I highly recommend it. Again, it would help a lot with kind of giving a foundational understanding of what accounting is and how you can use it for your organization. Another area here in the Academy is the How to Use Aplos section. So if you click on that, you can pick a product that you want to learn more about. So either accounting, donor relations, or donations, all products that we offer. So if you click on accounting, there's different webinars here that you can take a look at any time. These are all pre-recorded like we did here today, and then different useful guides that you can check out as well. So those are available to you. But our support is actually free as well. So if you ever have a question or need some help getting set up, feel free to give us a call, or this little question mark in the bottom right-hand corner here will bring up a conversation that you can have with us in the software whenever you want. Okay, well, it's been quite a lot of content from me. So let's open it up for some question and answer time. For those of you who are joining us as a pre-recorded session, so you're watching this after the fact. Thanks for taking the time. And if you have questions, please either use that little question mark here in the bottom right of the software or the website, or email support@aplos.com and let us know if you have any questions. But for those of you who are in the session here today, hang on for a minute. Feel free to use that question field that we took a look at a little bit earlier to submit any questions, and I'll be back in just a minute to answer those for you. Also, if you are an active member of Twitter, if you are a Twitter kind of person and you want to let us know how we did here today, feel free to use the little hashtag here, hashtag, NPTech, all lowercase, and just let us know how you thought today's webinar went. So give me a shout out, give me some different feedback, or just whatever. So if you enjoyed it, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. But if not, don't worry about it. But it's there for you if you want it. Okay, I'll be back in a few minutes to answer your questions. And for those of you, again, who are tuning in after the fact, thanks for showing up, and let us know if you have any questions. I'll be right back.